"We will not back down until the president takes the threat off the table," exclaimed Premier David Eby as he unveiled Canada's audacious strategy to block U.S. free access to Alaska. In that moment, the tension between two long-standing allies reached a fever pitch, setting the stage for a conflict that neither side could have fully anticipated. With President Trump's looming tariffs casting a long shadow over North American trade, Canada's bold maneuver promised to upend the status quo, challenging traditional power dynamics and igniting fierce debates across borders. At the heart of this unfolding drama lies the critical question: is this a calculated tactic or merely a bluff? In a twist of fate, the decision to restrict access to the vital Alaskan route was born not out of impulsivity, but as a deliberate effort to defend Canada's economic sovereignty and secure its own interests. The geopolitical landscape was shifting rapidly, and each declaration, every policy move, resonated with urgency and the weight of national pride. The free flow of commerce between the United States and Alaska has long been taken for granted, a seamless conduit that supports livelihoods and fuels industries. Yet now, as Canada steps into the fray with steely determination, viewers are left to wonder if the disruption will herald a new era of protectionism or forge a path toward deeper diplomatic engagement. This unexpected opening salvo challenges us to rethink the nature of international alliances and the human stories behind the headlines. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the escalating drama, where economic strategy and heartfelt patriotism collide in a battle for the future of cross-border relations. The trade dispute between the United States and Canada did not materialize in a vacuum. Instead, it emerged from a complex interplay of economic policy and geopolitical strategy, where President Trump's decision to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian imports set off a chain reaction. This tariff was intended as a punitive measure, targeting industries and goods that, according to the U.S. administration, had been unfairly subsidized. However, the immediate economic repercussions were felt across North America, and nowhere was the impact more pronounced than in the strategic corridors linking Alaska to the contiguous United States. Alaska, isolated by geography, yet crucially important for its natural resources and trade routes, relies heavily on Canada's vast infrastructure. The Alaska Highway, also known as the Alcan Highway, cuts through British Columbia's rugged landscapes, making Canada an indispensable partner in maintaining a smooth flow of commerce. From airspace control to the rail and road networks, Canada's role has always been that of an unseen yet vital intermediary. As the tariffs loomed, Canadian leaders recognized that any disruption in this linkage would not only affect trade flows, but could also destabilize an economic system that has long depended on cross-border connectivity. Moreover, the very announcement of these tariffs acted as a catalyst for rethinking economic sovereignty. Canadian policymakers, having faced similar challenges in the past, were quick to mobilize. There was a palpable sense of urgency, the realization that the U.S. was prepared to leverage economic might without fully considering the broader implications for the interconnected North American economy. The surprise element lay in the fact that, while Trump's tariffs were positioned as a tool to correct perceived trade imbalances, they inadvertently forced Canada to reassert its economic independence, a move that would ripple outwards, affecting international alliances and trade negotiations. In response to the U.S. move, Canada's reaction was as multifaceted as it was swift. The country's federal government, along with its various provincial administrations, quickly mobilized to counteract the potential damage from the tariffs. At the forefront of this response was British Columbia, BC, whose unique geographical position as the gateway to Alaska provided it with both the leverage and the responsibility to act decisively. BC's government proposed groundbreaking legislation that would impose tolls on commercial vehicles transiting through its territory en route to Alaska. This measure was not just about revenue generation, it was a symbolic and practical barrier designed to disrupt the smooth passage of U.S. goods, sending a powerful message that Canada would not be a passive conduit for policies it deemed harmful The legislation also included provisions requiring that low-carbon fuel additives used in gasoline and diesel be produced domestically, a clear push to bolster local industries and reduce reliance on imported technologies and resources. This dual strategy of economic protectionism and domestic industrial support underscored BC's commitment to shielding its economy from external pressures. Simultaneously, other provinces adopted their own countermeasures. Nova Scotia, for instance, took a hardline stance by barring American businesses from bidding on provincial government contracts and doubling the toll fees on commercial vehicles using key transit routes. The province also removed U.S.-made alcoholic products from public stores, reflecting a broader strategy to prioritize Canadian goods over foreign imports. Alberta, known for its energy resources, echoed these sentiments by preparing its own set of retaliatory measures. Premier Danielle Smith warned that the tariffs were an unjustifiable economic assault, predicting that such actions would lead to higher prices and job losses on both sides of the border. She called for a national unification effort to dismantle internal trade barriers and fast-track resource projects such as pipelines and LNG facilities. Manitoba and Newfoundland and Labrador further extended the Canadian response by targeting consumer goods. Manitoba's government took immediate steps to eliminate U.S. alcohol from provincial liquor marts, while Newfoundland and Labrador initiated a comprehensive review of procurement practices, temporarily halting purchases of U.S. goods. These localized responses highlight a critical aspect of the overall strategy. Canada was not merely reacting to American tariffs, but was actively restructuring its economic framework to reduce its reliance on the U.S. market. The interplay between these actions reflects a broader dynamic of multilateral negotiation and strategic posturing. On one side, the U.S. administration was banking on economic pressure to compel a change in trade policies, while on the other, Canada was leveraging every available tool, legislative, fiscal, and diplomatic, to assert its autonomy. The responses from various Canadian provinces, though diverse in their specifics, were unified in purpose to safeguard their economies and to force the United States to reconsider the broader implications of its unilateral tariff strategy. As the initial rounds of countermeasures rolled out, the economic and political tension between the two nations escalated to a critical point. The situation became a vivid illustration of how economic policies can serve as both a weapon and a shield in international relations. While President Trump's tariffs had been positioned as a strategic necessity for American industries, they inadvertently provided Canada with a catalyst to launch a robust and well-coordinated defense. This escalation reached its zenith as the various retaliatory measures began to interact in unexpected ways. The tolls on commercial vehicles imposed by BC, the bans and fee hikes in Nova Scotia, and the targeted procurement suspensions in Newfoundland and Labrador created a patchwork of barriers that not only disrupted trade but also highlighted the contrasting economic philosophies between the two nations. In numerous high-level diplomatic meetings, Canadian leaders were observed debating the best way to channel these localized actions into a coherent national strategy. They stressed the importance of maintaining a united front, emphasizing that a fragmented response would only serve to weaken their bargaining position. The U.S. reaction, while initially dismissive, grew increasingly cautious as the repercussions of its tariffs began to surface. American industries, especially those dependent on the free flow of goods through Canada, started voicing concerns over potential disruptions in supply chains. The interdependence between the two countries, once taken for granted, now became a focal point in diplomatic discussions. Trade experts noted that the economic gridlock could have long-lasting effects on both sides of the border, particularly in sectors like energy, manufacturing, and agriculture. Moreover, international observers began drawing comparisons between this unfolding crisis and past trade disputes, such as the softwood lumber conflict and earlier tariff skirmishes from the 20th century. These historical parallels added a layer of gravity to the situation, suggesting that this was not an isolated incident but part of a recurring cycle of economic tension. The contrasting strategies of the two nations became even more evident when examining the underlying motivations. While the U.S. was attempting to assert economic dominance, Canada was determined to reinforce its national identity and economic sovereignty. Throughout this intense period, The dialogue between the two countries took on multiple dimensions. Public statements, formal negotiations, and even behind-the-scenes communications all painted a picture of a delicate balance between confrontation and collaboration. Canadian officials, while stern and unwavering in their resolve, also hinted at the possibility of a negotiated settlement if the U.S. would demonstrate a willingness to compromise. In contrast, the U.S. stance, bolstered by a belief in the legitimacy of its national security claims, remained rigid at least for the time being. The economic stakes were high, with billions of dollars in trade at risk. Each decision carried the potential to reshape the regional economic landscape. This climax in the trade conflict was not merely about tariffs and tolls, it was a contest of wills, a battle for the right to determine the terms of economic engagement between two historically intertwined nations. The intensity of the interactions served to underscore a fundamental truth. In today's globalized world, the actions of one country inevitably reverberate far beyond its borders. In the midst of this heightened tension, Canada's multifaceted strategy emerged as a clear counter-narrative to the American approach. It was a testament to the resilience and adaptability of a nation determined to protect its interests while reaffirming its commitment to a fair and balanced international trading system. The unfolding events illustrated not only the economic implications of these policies, but also their profound impact on national identity, international alliances, and the future direction of cross-border trade relations. Ultimately, the escalating conflict revealed a complex web of interactions, a reminder that in the arena of global economics, every measure has a reaction. The bold moves by Canada not only challenged President Trump's tariff strategy, but also set the stage for a new chapter in North American trade relations, where strategic interdependence and economic sovereignty must find a new equilibrium. Hold on to your seats. A global trade shockwave is happening as Italy steps in to fill the void left by U.S. tariffs on Canada, a twist so unexpected, even the EU is in disbelief. In 2020, Italian exports stormed into Canada with a staggering $1.5 billion, and their wines alone smashed U.S. numbers with $409 million in sales. Welcome back. Today, we're diving into one of the most jaw-dropping shifts in international trade. Italy, long renowned for its culinary excellence, is now rewriting the rules in Canada's agri-food market. Thanks to slashing customs barriers, Italian wines and cheeses are flying off the shelves, leaving traditional powerhouses like the US trailing behind. Stay tuned as we explore how Italy's explosive market entry is shaking up global trade and what this means for consumers and producers alike. Chapter 1. Background on Trump's tariffs. Let's start by setting the stage. Back in 2018, President Donald Trump imposed a series of tariffs on several nations, citing unfair trade practices. Among the hardest hit countries were Canada and Mexico, as well as China. For Canada, the U.S. tariffs were particularly damaging because the two countries share one of the largest trading relationships in the world. In fact, the U.S. is Canada's largest trading partner, accounting for approximately 70% of Canada's total exports. Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminum, which were imposed at rates of 25% and 10% respectively, were seen as a protectionist measure to bolster American industries. But Canada, a major exporter of both commodities to the U.S., quickly felt the sting of these trade restrictions. Canada's steel exports to the U.S. were valued at $6.4 billion in 2018, and with tariffs in place, that figure dropped by over 38% in subsequent years. The threat of further tariffs loomed large, adding pressure on Canada to explore other trade avenues. How does this play out in the daily lives of Canadians? For consumers, the imposition of tariffs by the U.S. can lead to higher prices on goods, especially in industries like automotive manufacturing and construction. With steel and aluminum becoming more expensive, everyday products such as cars, appliances, and even homes could see price hikes. On the flip side, this has pushed Canada to seek alternative markets, which, in the long run, could help stabilize prices as the country diversifies its trade relationships. Chapter 2. Canada's strategy to diversify trade. By mid-2019, Canada's government began to recognize that relying heavily on the U.S. market was no longer a viable long-term strategy. The possibility of further trade restrictions loomed large, especially with the looming implementation of U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods. To counter this, Canadian officials turned to Europe and China as potential partners to bolster their trade portfolio. In 2020, Canada's total trade with the European Union amounted to $115.9